Jackson, what would be your thoughts on Hailie Deegan making a career change at this point to go to Indy NXT?
Oval expertise definitely helps, especially if the conversations would be entering at this point in the season. But my knowledge on Deegan is very, very low, especially when it comes to her history. I do know majority stock car stuff. For Andretti and them to be mutual on Instagram, I think that's less of something that's locked in, but I think there's definitely a possibility that talks are happening between those two. Yeah, it's really hard to say. I think she would be really strong on the ovals, but it is really hard to make that adjustment mentally from stock cars to open wheels, especially when you've driven stock cars a vast majority of your career. We were talking a little bit about this before the show, right when this came off, but I think the best bet, if it was anywhere that wasn't the Cup Series, great relationship with Ford. We've seen her run in the Mustang GT4 a couple times in the Michelin Pilot Challenge. If not Indy NXT, and maybe it's a part-time season next year, maybe it's ovals only, and we'll see. But I would not be surprised to see her also dipping her toe again in some sports car racing if she's not back in an Xfinity car or Truck Series car or any kind of stock car.
I think you were in our chat last week making that very argument there, so that could be
a
path for her as well. Brandon, what would be your thoughts on trying to make the switch over to open wheel?
As much as I think that's a viable option for her, and if Andretti Global is indeed with talks with her, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I do think, yeah, sports cars would be a much closer fit, I guess, for where she's coming from. Of course, I haven't been in it, but from going from a full-bodied stock car to a single-seater open wheel machine, I feel like it's a lot more athleticism that takes place, a lot more G's going on, and just see the pants endurance and just crazy stuff going on when you're driving an open wheel car, no matter what level it is. So no question, it's absolutely different from the world of NASCAR. So we'll definitely have a learning curve. But yeah, I agree. When she comes to the ovals, though, it should be not as bad, but still not without its learning curves for sure.
I want to say hi to Carrito here in the chat real quick, and looks like a comment just coming in from Alex Fleener as well. Do you think the lack of open Ford seats are holding her back from getting another ride in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, or is it just no openings right now? I think it might be that to an extent, but again, we can sugarcoat it all we want. The results just weren't there with AM Racing, and if we're being honest, they really weren't there for 3 years when she was driving for David Gilliland Racing and ThorSport Racing in the Truck Series. And again, I have to bring up, there's certainly, people said DGR was a B team. I don't know how you can call ThorSport anything but an A team when the rest of her teammates were in the playoffs and Ben Rhodes actually won the championship. So, again, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And I think, the results simply didn't showcase her talent in the NASCAR side of things. And I think, it's not to say she could never make it in stock car racing. But again, I think if she were to stay in that part of the motorsports world, I think the best option for her would be to go back to the ARCA platform and try to reinvent herself down there. Or maybe there's a truck team out there that would be willing to offer her something, who knows. But this is an interesting development here because, again, say what you will about the results. She has the stock car experience, and 18, 19, 20, 20, 21, 22, 23. That's 6 years full time between what was then K&N West, ARCA, and trucks before she even got to Xfinity this year. Now you throw a half season in there of that. I know the results haven't been great, but she has the miles underneath her in terms of, driving a stock car and all the learning that she did from that experience. And Jimmy Johnson, who's a 7-time Cup champion, said it when he was trying to make this switch just a few years ago. He had to unlearn so much to be able to pick up what he was trying to figure out in an Indy car. So it is a very difficult career change to make. And that's a 7-time champion saying that. I know Jimmy probably wasn't in his prime in his early to mid 40s, but if he was struggling that much with it, I imagine it's not going to be an easy task for Deegan. That's not saying that I put it past her or anything, but I think that, for her at this point in her career, and she is still very young. I think she turns 23 later this week, actually. So, plenty of time for her to figure out what she wants to do with the rest of her career. But I think that, where she is in stock car racing right now was going to be a challenge to figure out what would be that next step for her in a world that she's become very familiar with. To go over to Indy NXT, I mean, if she wants to take that challenge on, God bless her. I wish her nothing but the best. But I imagine, we saw, how much Jamie Chadwick struggled coming into Indy NXT last year. And, again, not to say that W Series cars or, Formula 4 cars are identical to Indy NXT. Obviously, they're not. But you would think there'd be a lot more overlap from going from a European open wheel single seater series over to Indy NXT than there is coming from stock car racing over to Indy NXT with minimal, if any, open wheel experience. I don't know. I mean, I know Deegan rode him at two-seater all those years ago. People were digging up that tweet from 2019, which is kind of ironic to think about now. But it's going to be very interesting. So we'll see if she takes this challenge on. I'll be very curious to see how she could do. But again, I think as for her right now, Carrito says the same thing here in the chat. I think IMSA probably makes, Michelin Pilot Challenge, you look at the results she had there, probably makes most sense for her at this point in her career.
Yeah, and Jackson, like we've been talking about Hailie Deegan the last 2 or 3 weeks since she's been in the news. I've been keeping track of where AM Racing is finishing with their other drivers. Joey Logano finished 8th with that 15 car, and we talked about it. We don't think Hailie Deegan would be up in P8 at a place like the Loop 110 in Chicago. But then, I mean, on that same token, you go to the Pocono weekend here for the Xfinity Series. Josh Berry finishes in that same car, 27th. And that sounds a little more like where we might think Hailie Deegan would finish up at a place like Pocono. I mean, anyone in the AM Racing car. But that is the Xfinity Series. We'll get to there when we get to there. But just while you're here, Jackson, that's kind of where I've been tracking it.
I will point out, to be completely fair, Barry had a couple of flat tires. I don't know if you can pin that on the team necessarily, but it certainly did not help his cause. Jackson, do you have any?
I don't remember, but I'll throw this back to you because, again, we were chatting during the Loop 110. You were saying that Logano was chatting with some of the crew members, I think, in and out of the car, and it seemed like there might have been some factors that were just not generally driver friendly with that outfit. And you can correct me on that, but it seemed like Logano was also kind of making some corrections, and it seemed like maybe there was some reason why it was hard for her to feel at home there.
I don't know. Oh, yeah, I mean, of course, they replaced the crew chief before they replaced the driver.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't think, I'm not trying to excuse Deegan's bad results and say none of it's on her at all, because, you have Truck Series results to reference as well. But, we know that they've got the technical alliance with SHR. You would think on paper that would make them a pretty prepared team. It did sound like, I don't remember off the top of my head what the exact quote was, but it sounded like there were people saying, Joey Logano must just be going crazy in the car because it sounds like this team's very underprepared. And then you have what happened to Josh Berry this weekend. So perhaps not entirely. I'm not even going to say perhaps. Definitely not entirely on Hailie Deegan, the fact that the AM Racing team was struggling so much to get top 20 finishes. But, at the same time, the Xfinity Series is very competitive. And we know AM Racing had some solid results for Brett Moffitt the previous year. So, again, I think it probably made sense for both sides to go their separate ways at this point, just for whatever reason it wasn't working out. But I'll just say Indy NXT, not where I expected Deegan to potentially land here. And again, I feel silly even broaching the whole social media thing because, I think people get so freaked out. Like, I think LeBron James unfollowed the Cleveland Cavaliers one time on Twitter, and everybody was like, oh, what does this mean? He's going to leave in free agency. And I think, just to base an entire prediction off of that, I think is, a massive stretch. Anytime we bring up who's following who or who's unfollowing who on social media, I don't think you can put too much stock in that. But it is interesting to look at that and connect the dots and think, is there some sort of business connection there that could lead to some conversations, which potentially lead to, an opportunity opening up. So it's something I guess you could keep your eyes on here, but don't want to put too much stock into that either. Deegan said in her statement as soon as the news broke that, she's actively searching for opportunities to continue her racing career. And, finish out the year with somebody in some series. So we'll keep an eye on it. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we're talking about her and her career this season. But again, would be a very interesting path for her to go down and interesting challenge for her to take up. We'll see.